What's going on, good people? This video, I'm going to continue building out a coding challenge that I did with the password generator some time ago. What I want to be able to do is to have this password generator be able to spit out multiple passwords at one time. So basically you call the program, define some arguments, and then it will give an output without you having to manually interact with the program. The reason I want to do this is I want to be able to uh, extend the functionality of the existing program, but then also be able to give it everything it needs in a single command, and then it gives me everything back. And then from there, I could potentially use this in, let's say, a automation script to create users, or use it in a script for like WebDriver for creating accounts or something of that nature. And then also when it comes to the length of the password, in the original coding challenge, we had to specify the length of numbers, letters, and symbols. This video, I want you to try to get that so that if you don't provide, or if you provide an argument, it will just automatically come up with those numbers within a given range, and then continue with the rest of the process. That being said, let's get started. All right, so this code will be available on GitHub. So if you want to have a copy of it, by all means, you can go to my GitHub in the coding challenge repository. This will be the password generator project. And what I want to do, so this code has not been changed. It may have been modified a little bit. I think I did add a function here to process the inputs. And what I want to do is actually change that so that if a value is not provided, or if an argument is not provided, for it to randomly figure out a number for each of these types, then it prompts the user for the value that should be used. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and copy, let's see, I want to copy these remaining lines here and not do that. All right, and let's go ahead and do format to rearrange that. So I want to do a if, and I guess we can specify the arguments here. And what I like to do is when I do my arguments, I have a function that handles the arguments, and based on those functions, based on what arguments are set, it defines some variables in here. So I'm going to create a private, not pragget, private static, we'll call it void for now, and then we'll call it process arguments, and we'll do a string of args. And this is literally being called after the password generator. So we want to do process arguments, and we're literally passing in what is being passed into the main. So this goes into our process arguments function. From this, we'll probably set some class level variables because, well, let me write this function out here, because I probably don't actually even need I'll probably put it into a function after I get done with everything, but to initially write all of this out is not necessary. So what I want to do is loop over every argument that is being provided. So I'm going to do a for each var argument in args, and then for so what we want to do is if argument is equal to, and we'll do a double dash. Now you can do a single dash or double dash. I'm using a Linux computer, and normally when you're providing, if you're doing shorthand, you do a single dash. If you're doing the longhand version of an argument, you do a double dash. And to further demonstrate that example, so let's do a grep and -H, which is shorthand, and so it gives you that. But as you see here, even in this shorthand help, it says try grep with the --help for more information. And so if I do --help, it gives you a whole lot more output. So that's kind of the way you could do it. So I could do it with the shorthand, I could do it with the longer hand, or I could do both. And another example of this, since we are coding in .NET Core, so .NET Core -H gives you the help information here. And as you see here, it has two options. So it has the -H for the shorthand, and then the --help for the long hand. Same thing for diagnosis. You got the -D and --diagnosis. So, like I say, I'm gonna do it with the --. I could probably go back and code it later with the single dash as an option as well. So this argument we want to do, we'll call it random length, and I guess we can go ahead and do the single option as well. So if argument random length or argument is equal to -r, we'll just call it that for short. All right, then we want to do, I have a random down here. So what I'm gonna do is actually move this up in the code, and I'm going to put it here, and that way I can leverage it within my for each. So we want to copy, let's see. So I need these 4 items as well. So what I'm gonna do is delete these and copy and move these up here. And so we'll initialize them to 0. Let's see, format. There we go. All right, so we'll initialize them to 0. And then in here, if we got random length, what I would do is do number of letters is equal to random. And we want to set the min range. I'm going to define this as an int, and the min range, we'll set it to 3. And then on the same line, do max range, and we'll set it to 6. All right, so that being said, with min range and max range, what I'm going to do with those values is set the range for the random. So the minimum number, and I may need to change this up a little bit for, well, I'll take that back out. So let's do this. So we want our password to be a minimum number of letters, but we also want to have a maximum number of letters, numbers, and symbols. Excuse me, not just letters. So what I want to do is do random.next, and ideally we can use symbols in there, but we want to have a minimum length. So to get, ideally, from my experience, systems have a minimum length of 8 characters as a password and a maximum length of like 20 or something like that nature. So I want to do a combination that would be on the low end 8, and on the high end, let's say, we'll actually go with 16, because 20 seems, while that would be a more secure password, 20 is kind of pushing the limit of a lot of systems. So to get so we'll do next for, so we'll do min value, and we'll do 8 on this one. So that's letters. So next we'll do symbols, random.next, and we'll do 2 and 4, and then num of numbers, random.next is 2 and 4. I believe that's right. So 4 and 4 is, if I can highlight it correctly. So 4 and 4 is 8, and 8 to 8 is 16. So we have our max of, let's do this again. All right, so here we have 4 and 4 is 8, and then you have 8 onto that, so it's max length of 16. On the minimum, you have 2, 2, which is 4, and another 4, which is 8. So it will pick a password between 8 and 16 characters if we have the random length argument specified. All right, the next thing we want to do is to specify the number of passwords. And so in order to do that, because right now the way it's currently set, it will only generate one password per run. So what I want to do is to expand this. And so we'll say if argument is equal to, let's see, really, let me change the code up a little bit. So what I think I want to do now, to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to do a switch statement instead of an if condition. You can do this with an if condition, but I think once you get to a certain number of if statements, it becomes more efficient to use a switch statement instead of an if statement. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and switch. So I'm going to take the same functionality up here and just move it and put it within a case. So we'll do random length, and then we'll do another case statement with -r, and then we will paste our numbers and so forth here. And then we'll do a break, and then as always, you'll want to specify a default condition, even if there is nothing to do with no action to actually do in that default condition. I would always make it a habit of specifying it. So then the next case will be a, we'll call it -n, and above that, so I'm going to do case, and we'll put a little bit more space in here. So we'll do we'll do count. We'll call it count, and then we'll do this as -c. That way it makes a little bit more sense. And so we'll want to do and I have a process input function, but I don't want to, well, I want to be able to use this logic here to make sure that it is an integer, but I don't want it to prompt. So what I may do is, for the time being, I'm gonna copy this out of here and paste it back. And then when you get to a point of refactoring, probably modify the code accordingly so that it does a more valid, it doesn't have the same code written in it more than once. All right, so we're not writing an input, and we are taking the argument. For this, I actually need the argument +1. So I'm gonna have to get rid of this for statement and do int I equals 0, I less than args dot length I plus, and for this, you want to do args I, and when we come down here, so we want to do args I +1. And so what this will do is, so if the current argument is double dash count or -c, then we want to get the integer value specified with the integer value specified after these arguments. So that's where you get the argument, which is the current argument +1, which would be that specified number. And then we want to convert that into an integer, and then we want this to be we want this to be a variable, so that needs to be password gen count, I guess, or password gen count is equal to 0, and then we'll set password gen count, or set the number specified to password gen count, assuming that it does not throw an exception. If it does throw an exception, You don't need a break statement there. If it does throw an exception, you want the program to exit. So let's see. Not sure how to do that here. So what I'm gonna do, I know I want the program to exit if they throw an invalid argument. So what I'm gonna do is actually just take out the try block for the time being until I have a little bit of a moment to go back and research that. All right, so just to recap what we've done thus far. So we have a for loop, and we can get rid of that statement. I have a for loop that will loop through all of the arguments that have been provided, and from here we'll have each of those values. For if you provide the random length argument, we'll do this here. If you provide the count, it will do this here. And we need to do one more option here. And so that case will be if dash H, and then we'll also do another one here where the case is help, because we want to provide some help output. And so we want to call a function print help and do a break. And then here we'll do control dot, and we'll create a method called print help. And if we go to that definition, so this will be a combination of, or well, it will consist of, not a combination, of console write lines that output the usage. So for example, how we have here this long output for the .NET-H, similar in nature for that. So what I'm gonna do is actually kind of mimic this. So we'll go with, on this first line, usage, and then we'll say password generator TOR, spelling is critical, and then arguments. That's on that line. Then another console write line. And you could do this console write line as one long string to make it easier to manage. And come to think of it, I probably will just do that. So let's take this back. So we'll do string of help output, and we'll do that. And then let's see. So we have that one there. Do that one plus. That's not right. Wait a minute. Yeah, that's okay. So I am missing a new line. I'm trying to think, is that correct? Let's see, console dot. No. Okay, I'm getting my technologies mixed up here. All right, so to do that, so /r/n, and that's a difficult thing to type. So what I'm gonna do is, because that character return is a difficult thing to type, I'm gonna type new line and put that there. And then so that new line. And if I do a semicolon here, that error should, oh, well, I'm missing that at the end. That error should go away. There we go. All right, so we have that, and then plus new line. IntelliSense helps makes things a little bit easier. All right, so the next thing in this part, so they have a description of what the application is. So I'm going to call it generate a password with the new line. If I could type, there we go. All right, and then we'll do another blank new line plus new line. All right, the next one is runtime option. So we have to provide our arguments. So we have a, what do we have? We have the dash H, or, whoops, need to put it in quotation marks. So dash H or double dash help, and provides help how well, we'll say displays this screen. I've seen this done before. I know it's kind of a rudimentary way of what the help is, but essentially that is what the help is. It shows you the current screen. All right, the next one will be the -R, and I think that's what we called it, -R. Yeah, R with random length and C with count. All right, so random length display generates passwords of, put that in parentheses, of random length. And then the last one is -C with a count. Generates 1, 2, 3. Specified number of passwords. There we go. All right, so after we do all that, then we do help output and remove that last one. Now we could do formatting of these here so that they tab up, kind of like how this is tabbed up, but that's a little bit more advanced. So I'm not going to get into that with this particular video. But what you could do is a cheap, not necessarily a cheap way, but a quicker way of doing it is you space out everything so that it lines up here, and then when you run that, it will line up correctly. All right, so let's give this program a go, and actually need to do .NET run with, I believe I can pass the arguments here. No, okay. So I need to, let's do .NET build, and once it builds, all right, so do clear, and then cd bin debug net core app 3.1, and then do /password generator --help, and there we go. So we have the help information here. Now, what should not happen, it should not prompt you for that information there. So we're going to have to fix that particular part. So where are we? So we are here with the help. What I'm going to do is to actually move the remaining parts of the current main, the current code in main, and we will move this, highlight the code, use control dot, and call extract method, and then we'll say password, let's see, generate password. That's a very good, not, well, I mean, that is what it's doing, but probably not the best usage of that. All right, so we'll go with generate password. All right, there we go. So with this, if does not need to return that value. All right, so we'll also need to update this here. And what this needs to do is now, so if we're generating the password, then this function needs to be called here, as well as, well, no, take that back. So if we do a break, okay. This is an interesting setup that I got myself into. All right, so outside of the for loop, if the, so it needs to go outside of the for loop because we want to go make sure that we go through all of the arguments. And if we do go through all of the arguments, and let's see, if we probably need to set another value here, and if help is, So we'll do a boolean and call do help and set it to false. And if come down here, and if we print the help, then set do help equal to true. And if we did the help, so if do help is equal to false, then we run the generate password. If it's equal to true, we want to skip over that. All right, and so that will, I think this will address that issue. As for these, if, let's see. So we need to have, so the random numbers, if the random numbers, so if all the random numbers are equal to 0, then yeah. So if the random numbers are equal to 0, we want to skip over the processing of the input. So I'm just going to add if, really you don't have to check all of them, because if 1 is equal to 0 is not equal, no, if it's equal to 0, then we want to prompt for all of the values, because by default these variables will be 0. All right, and did I do that right? Yes. All right, so so that's an output variable. I'm not sure why it specified it to be a, oh, I know why, because we're passing it in, but it doesn't need to be an out variable. So let's change this, these outs to just be variables passed in, because what is happening is because I used the extract method thing, it assumed that these would be out variables and would be reused in the main function. But in this particular scenario, that's not true. All right, so we're only checking the num of letters. So because we're only checking the num of letters, yeah, that should be sufficient. All right, so let's go back. So we're here and we want to, if we're just performing the help task, then we want to skip over that. I know some people are, you're probably watching this and be like, why does he have it set to equal to false? Well, you could also do this, because I know some people prefer to do this with their code, and it's essentially the same thing, but my personal preference is when you're doing these type of statements, it's very easy in some programming languages. This one, .NET Core, not necessarily being one of them, but it's very easy to see what I have highlighted here as a single variable instead of an exclamation point with a variable next to it. So I try to refrain from doing that, and I prefer to write my, when I have these type of conditions, I prefer to write it equal to false to make it clearly evident that you are looking for a false condition here, instead of this exclamation with the variable name, which is basically a not statement. So if do help is not equal to true, which is basically saying if do help is equal to false. So, you know, I try to avoid what is known as, I think it's called like an inverse condition. That's one of the, if I recall correctly, it's mentioned in Robert Martin's Clean Code book about using inverse conditional statements, because the logic behind it is kind of confusing. Like, you can see it and process it, but when you're actually trying to process your, you know, think your way through it, it can be rather confusing to process and try to get correct. So now that I've done with that spiel, all right, so everything else should be working as it should. So if we come back here and do, I don't know if I can do .NET build from this directory, and I can't. All right, so we'll go back to the password generator and do .NET build. And what I'm going to do is open a new tab in my SSH session, and then we'll go to that build directory. So .NET bin all the way down / password generator / help, and there we go. And then if I do a dash H, it should give me the same output, and it does. So we know that the help screen is working the way it should be. Yeah, there we go. All right, so the next part is we're going to double check their logic right quick and then try to run this and see what happens when we run it. So just to make sure, so we have our number of letters all being set. So we have here the number of letters is equal to 0, but because we're giving it random values, if the argument is passed, this should never equal 0. Well, all of these should never equal 0, but specifically, we're checking the number of letters because that's the one that we're just only checking. You could write this if condition to check each one of these values to make sure that they're not equal to 0, but because of what we have here, if the number of letters is not equal to 0, it is very unlikely, unless something, memory exception or something else occurs, that these other two variables would be 0. And even if then that something like a memory exception would occur, it would throw that exception and probably wouldn't even execute these last two statements when generating those random values. So the rest of this code wouldn't even run. All right, that being said, the other thing we need to do is to have, so let's set password gen count to 1, because now that I think about it, you want this to run at least one time. And so if I do this here, so a for statement, and I want to int equals 0, excuse me, not int. Let's call this, so we got password gen count there. Let's see, we'll stick with I don't think I have an I in this. I do have an I in this, so I can't use I. Well, no, I'm sorry. So this I is for that loop, so I can do I here again. So if I equals 0, I less than password gen count and I++, and then we want to do the generate password and do format and also do trim real quick. All right, and so just to recap, so if a user passes in the argument of $count or -c, we want it to convert this to a int32. And what I'm gonna do here is, so I'm gonna re-enable this try catch, and we'll say invalid input. And what will happen here is we'll default the password gen count to 1 if an exception occurs. And I'm gonna do the same thing here. Could I have put this statement here in a finally block? Yes. Am I going to do that? No, because then I will have to have a condition that will check to see if the password gen is equal to 1 or greater than 1, and that's a little bit extra code. So it's easier just to drop it and set this value here, that if you have an exception if you throw an exception, then just default it to 1, and that ensures that even if the value that you're typing in for the count is mistyped, or if it's not an integer, or if it's not entered, like if you type the argument but don't type the secondary argument with it, that it is caught. And I guess the other thing with this is to also catch, I guess, a general exception with this particular value, because I'm not, I think it's argument null, or argument exception. I'm not sure which one it is. So we're gonna go to an argument exception for this. And when we test it, if it doesn't work the way you would think it would work, then we'll just handle it accordingly and still set it to 1. That way it won't cause any other issues. and we'll say error occurred, because most users don't understand exceptions, but they do understand error. So I'm gonna type that there, error, and then do open brace 0, close brace with ex.message as the value to replace the 0 placeholder here. And we're still going to set that to the password gen count to 1. That way we still get a password even if we throw an exception. All right, this looks like it is ready to go. The rest of the logic for actually generating the password is not changed. We just added other things around it to process or address what needs to be done. And that being said, let's go back to the console and we'll do another .NET build on this console tab. All right, build succeeded. So let's clear the screen and I'm going to do /password generator. And this time I'm going to pass in, let's see, we're going to do a -r. And so it should just give me, there we go. So it works. So we have it generating a random password, and I can do this as many times as I want. And as you see here, the length of the password is changing each time. These 2 times they got the same length, which is still acceptable. This one is a little bit longer. If you kind of draw a line straight down, you'll see that it doesn't quite hit. And this one is clearly shorter. I think this one is the minimum length of 8 characters, as you see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so the next thing is to try out the count. And so we'll do -r -c, and we'll give it a count of 5. So this time we should get 5 passwords. There we go. And so we have our 5 passwords, and they're all the same length. And I think that has to do with the random generator, because the random function, when you initialize it, if I'm not mistaken, it uses the current time to get a random value. So that is probably playing a part in the length of the password. Well, I take that back. No, because we're actually setting, so it's setting the random length in the beginning. And because it's setting the random length in the beginning, that means when it does that count, then it's going to do that each time. Okay. So let's see. So let's change some of the logic here so that we get a different password length each time that we do multiple passwords. So what I want to do is actually to move this. So we're going to move this to a method. Control dot extract method, and we'll leave that there, and we'll rename this new method to get random lengths, lengths. There we go. All right, and so if we go to the definition of that, it will get the random lengths and then return those back to their respective values. But that function does not need to go here. It needs to actually go down here in our for. And so we want to do if random lengths is equal, not the function call, come on, lengths is equal to, well, we'll just leave it there. So it is understood that if that is true, then we want to do this function call and set that here. And then we need to define this as a, need to generate a variable, and we'll call it not a property, it's not a parameter. Or is it no, it's not a parameter. So it's not a field either. Okay. Not seeing what I wanted to see. So we'll do bool random lengths is equal to false. And then here we will set random lengths is equal to true and not double equals. That's comparison operator. All right, that should work there. And then so when we come down here, if get random lengths is, yeah, so if this is true, then it will get the random lengths, and then we will get random values for our passwords each time. So let's go ahead and do a build. And if we come back over to our console and do a run with 5 passwords. All right, and so now we're getting 5 passwords with different lengths, as you see here. Yeah, so we're getting 5 passwords with different lengths. And that's what you should get out of a randomizing function. Let's see, are there any other scenarios that we want to test? So we're getting 5. So let's see what happens if we do the R without, excuse me, we do the C without the R. All right, and so because we're not doing random passwords, but we are doing the count, it will prompt 5 times. All right, so it gave that password, and so it's going to ask again 5 times how many letters do you want in your password, and then we'll just keep going. All right, and so it asked us 5 times how many letters would we like in our password. This does work, but I do not see a use case for just this -C5 option, but I'm going to leave it in there just in case, you know, I may have a use case for it. I don't foresee a use case for it, but it is useful to have it. Now that we've done that, let's go back and demonstrate the full values, the full length name of the arguments. So we're going to do the same function with the _ random length as being passed in as an argument. And there we go. So we can confirm that that works. And then if we do just -R, we can also see that that works. And then if we do the same thing before with the count fully specified, you'll see here we get our 5 passwords with the arguments, the full length, the full name of the arguments being specified here too. So I believe this works the way that it is intended. It's still saying your password is for each of these. What could be done is if you are specifying if an argument count is greater than 0, you could possibly trim this out. That way you know you want the program to run in kind of a headless type mode. But I'm not going to do that right now. That may be a future enhancement to this coding challenge. And so you're probably asking, well, what happens if you don't pass any arguments? So let's go ahead and try that option as well. And as you see, it works as it did in the original coding challenge, where it asks you how many of each that you want, and then it spits out a password in the end. So that will wrap things up for this particular video. I'll continue to add on to these existing coding challenges that I've done so that you know how to add additional features to your particular application that you're building. If this video has been helpful, or if you have any questions about anything that you've seen in this video, please give me a thumbs up if you like it, and then drop your question down below afterwards, or your comment down below afterwards as well. If this is your first time to the channel, please be sure to consider subscribing. Each week a new tech video comes out on Tuesday. I also have videos that come out on Saturday. So do subscribe, do give it a thumbs up. Till next time, out.